Dorothy adjusted the strap of her worn-out purse as she stepped out of her tiny apartment. The morning air was crisp, but her mind was elsewhere. She had spent last night counting every coin, hoping it would be enough. Lucas, her 10-year-old grandson, had watched her with concern. "Grandma, do you have enough?" She had smiled, ruffling his hair. "Of course, sweetheart." But in her heart, she wasn't so sure. The pharmacy was packed. Customers grabbed energy drinks, diapers, and prescriptions, lost in their own worlds. Dorothy stood in line, clutching the small pouch of coins against her chest. She had waited all her life. This was nothing new, but patience was a luxury not everyone possessed. Ethan, the young cashier, tapped his fingers impatiently on the counter. His shift had been long, and he wasn't in the mood for slow customers. When Dorothy finally reached him, she offered a warm smile. "Good morning, dear." Ethan barely glanced at her. "Prescription." Dorothy carefully slid the paper across the counter. Ethan punched a few keys, sighed, and muttered, $23.50. She nodded, untying the pouch. The sound of coins clinking against the counter made Ethan's expression twist in irritation. "Are you serious?" he scoffed, loud enough for others to hear. Heads turned. Dorothy, unaware of the attention, kept counting. Ethan let out a dry laugh. "You've got to be kidding me. Who even pays like this anymore?" Dorothy hesitated. Her hands trembled slightly, but she kept sorting the coins. Ethan rolled his eyes. "Ma'am, I don't have all day. Maybe let the people with actual money go first." A quiet chuckle from someone in line. Dorothy's cheeks burned. She wanted to explain, wanted to tell them about her pension, about how every cent was saved carefully. But what was the point? No one wanted to hear her story. The store buzzed with whispers. Customers smirked, some looking away in discomfort. Then, "That's enough." The words sliced through the air like a blade. The laughter stopped. The whispers died. Dorothy turned, startled. A man stood just behind her, dressed in a black jacket, his posture relaxed yet commanding. There was something about him, an effortless authority that made the entire room pause. Ethan narrowed his eyes, unimpressed. "And who exactly do you think you are?" The man didn't answer. Slowly, he removed his sunglasses. A sharp gasp from someone in line. And then, a hushed whisper. "Oh my God. That's Keanu Reeves." Ethan's smirk faltered, but he forced a laugh, crossing his arms. "Yeah, right," he scoffed. "Keanu Reeves? Sure, and I'm the president." But the growing murmur in the pharmacy told another story. Customers nudged each other, eyes widening. A woman fumbled with her phone, her hands shaking as she hit record. Dorothy blinked, still kneeling to pick up her fallen coins. She didn't recognize the man, but something in his presence made her feel safe. Keanu's expression remained calm, his gaze locked onto Ethan. "So," he said, his voice smooth but firm, "is this how you treat people every day? Or just the ones you think can't fight back?" Ethan shifted uncomfortably, glancing around. His confidence was slipping, but he wasn't ready to back down. "Look, man, this lady's holding up the line. I'm just trying to do my job." Keanu tilted his head slightly. "Your job?" He glanced at the counter, where Dorothy's carefully stacked coins still sat. "Pretty sure your job isn't to humiliate an elderly woman for paying with cash." A few people in line muttered in agreement. The same customers who had chuckled moments ago were now staring at Ethan differently. Ethan scoffed, his voice less steady than before. I wasn't humiliating her, I was just what?" Keanu interrupted, stepping forward. His voice wasn't raised, but the weight behind it made Ethan freeze. "Just making her feel small, just proving you have power over someone who doesn't deserve it." The air in the pharmacy felt heavier. Even the manager, who had been pretending not to notice the commotion, was now watching nervously. Dorothy, still crouched on the floor, felt her hands tremble, not from humiliation but from something else entirely. For the first time in a long time, someone was standing up for her, and she had no idea just how far this moment was about to go. Ethan swallowed hard, the heat of 100 eyes pressing down on him. He had walked this fine line before, mocking customers, pushing them just enough to feel superior, but never enough to face real consequences. But now everything felt different. The weight in Keanu's stare was suffocating. The energy in the room had shifted. A woman near the back whispered to her husband, "It's really him." Another customer held their phone up, recording everything. The realization hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just some old lady anymore. This was a moment, one that was already slipping out of his control. He forced a laugh, trying to claw back the power he felt slipping away. "All right, man, relax. It's not that deep. She's just slowing down the line." Keanu didn't blink. "And that justifies humiliating her?" Ethan exhaled sharply. "Look, if she doesn't have enough money, maybe she should come back when she does. I don't have time to count pennies." Dorothy flinched at the words, her fingers tightening around her pouch. The embarrassment was still fresh, but now, standing next to Keanu, it no longer felt unavoidable. It felt unfair. Keanu slowly tilted his head. "How much is she short?" Dorothy hesitated, barely whispering, $5. Keanu reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp $100 bill, placing it on the counter without breaking eye contact with Ethan. "That should be enough," Keanu said. The store fell into complete silence. Ethan's face turned red. His lips parted, but no words came out. The same customers who had laughed earlier were now staring at him with something different, disgust. Then, from across the pharmacy, the sharp voice of the manager rang out. "Ethan," he called, his face pale. "My office, now." Ethan felt his stomach plummet. He had spent years feeling untouchable behind this counter, but today, the universe had other plans. Ethan's hands clenched into fists at his sides. His face burned under the weight of the stares around him. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He was always in control, always the one with the last word. But now, the room was slipping away from him. He forced a smirk, trying to act unaffected. "Come on, this is ridiculous," he muttered, but his voice lacked the confidence it held before. "It's just $5. You're making a big deal out of nothing." Keanu exhaled through his nose, amused but unimpressed. $5, he repeated slowly. "That's what it takes for you to treat someone with dignity?" A few customers chuckled under their breath. Ethan's stomach twisted. The manager took a step closer, his expression tight with restrained anger. "Now, Ethan." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't dare argue. Without another word, he turned and stormed toward the back of the store. Customers whispered as he passed, some still recording. He could already feel his phone buzzing in his pocket. Messages, notifications, something telling him that this moment was already bigger than the four walls of this pharmacy. Keanu turned back to Dorothy, his expression softening. "Are you all right?" She nodded, though her hands still trembled. I didn't mean to cause trouble." "You didn't," Keanu assured her. "Some people just need to be reminded how to treat others." Dorothy blinked rapidly, her emotions bubbling to the surface. For years she had learned to endure, to shrink herself, to accept moments like this as just part of life. But today was different. A woman in line suddenly spoke up. "Mr. Reeves, why did you step in?" Keanu looked around at the people still watching. He gave a small, knowing smile, because kindness should be normal. A hush fell over the store. Simple words, but the weight behind them was undeniable. Dorothy clutched her bag of medicine, blinking back tears, not of shame this time, but of gratitude. Keanu adjusted his jacket and gave her a small nod. "Take care of yourself, Dorothy." She gasped softly. You know my name?" Keanu smiled. "I was listening." And with that, he turned and walked toward the exit. The doors slid open, golden sunlight spilling across the floor as he stepped outside. The world may have been filled with cruelty, but today, kindness had won. Ethan sat in the manager's office, his leg bouncing anxiously as the older man paced back and forth. His heart pounded against his ribs. He had screwed up before, been rude, cut corners, even made a few customers upset, but nothing like this. This was different. The manager stopped and let out a sharp breath. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" Ethan scoffed, leaning back in his chair. "Come on, it's not that serious." The manager's eyes darkened. Wrong answer. Without a word, he pulled out his phone and turned the screen toward Ethan. A video played. His video. His stomach dropped. The footage showed everything. His sarcastic comments, his cruel jokes, the moment Keanu Reeves stepped in. And worse, it wasn't just one video. It was everywhere. The manager's grip tightened around the phone. "This has already hit 1 million views." Ethan's mouth went dry. A million?" The manager nodded. "Corporate just called. They don't want their brand tied to this." He sighed, rubbing his temple before locking eyes with Ethan. "You're fired." The words landed like a hammer. Ethan felt the ground slip from beneath him. "Wait, what? No, come on." "There's no fixing this," the manager said coldly. "Get your things and leave, now." Ethan opened his mouth to argue, but one look at the manager's face told him it was useless. This wasn't just losing a job, this was his entire reputation going up in flames. He shoved his chair back and stormed toward the door. As he stepped out into the pharmacy, every eye turned to him. The same customers he had mocked now watched him walk away in disgrace. Some whispered, some smirked, but most just stared. One woman held up her phone, clearly still recording. Ethan felt the heat rise to his face as he yanked off his name tag and tossed it aside. His hands balled into fists. He had never felt this small before. As he stepped outside, the cold air hit his face. He exhaled sharply, trying to push down the panic rising in his chest. Then, "Hey kid." His body stiffened. That voice, that damn voice. He turned slowly, and there stood Keanu Reeves, hands in his pockets, calm, unshaken, and still looking at him like he could see straight through him. Ethan's throat went dry as he faced Keanu Reeves, who stood there with the same calm intensity that had shattered his arrogance minutes ago. The world around them seemed to fade. Just the two of them, standing outside the pharmacy, one man stripped of his false confidence, the other still unshaken. Keanu tilted his head slightly. "So," he said, his voice steady, "what did you learn?" Ethan forced a bitter laugh, shoving his hands into his pockets. "Learn?" he scoffed. "Yeah, I learned that if you embarrass the wrong old lady, the whole world turns against you." Keanu raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "No," he said simply. "You didn't learn anything." Ethan clenched his jaw, his fists tightening. "What do you want from me, man?" he snapped. "An apology." "Fine, I'm sorry, okay? Happy now?" Keanu just studied him, silent for a moment. Then, he took a slow step closer. "Let me ask you something," he said, his voice softer but heavier. "If that had been your grandmother standing at that counter, would you have treated her the same way?" Ethan flinched. The question hit harder than he expected. His mind flashed back to childhood memories, his own grandmother, the way she used to slip him extra candy when his parents weren't looking, the way she always smelled like lavender and warm bread. He thought about how fragile she had become in her later years, how much it had hurt to see her struggle with things that once came so easily. He wouldn't have dared. Keanu saw the shift in Ethan's eyes, the way his shoulders sagged just slightly, but he didn't push. Instead, he pulled something from his pocket, a small card. "This is an address," Keanu said, holding it out. "They could use some extra hands." Ethan frowned, hesitating before taking the card. He read the words. It was a community shelter. He scoffed. "You think I need to do charity work to make up for this?" Keanu gave the smallest of smirks. "No," he said. "I think you need to do it to figure out what kind of man you really are." Ethan stared at him, the words settling in deeper than he wanted to admit. Keanu patted him lightly on the shoulder. "The world doesn't need more guys who make people feel small," he said. "It needs more people willing to stand up for others. Think about that." And with that, Keanu turned and walked away, disappearing into the city like he had never been there at all. Ethan looked down at the card in his hand, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. For the first time in a long time, he didn't have a snarky response, and maybe, just maybe, he didn't want one.